welcome to this week's weekly Pan-African News Roundup on the Kente Business Journal. Here we serve you with all the major news headlines across Africa and the African diaspora. My name is Rahel Akosia-Redua Opoku. In today's headlines, China says the US is avoiding responsibility in Africa debt relief, and Kenya sent its first operational satellite to space. And in sports, Serena Williams lauds progress of tennis in Ghana. Now the news in details. China on Monday urged the United States to earnestly shoulder its responsibilities and make greater efforts to address debt issues in African countries. The Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin made the call when responding to accusations from some US and World Bank officials that China is an obstacle in African debt relief. According to the spokesman, China is not the source of the debt trap of African countries, but a partner in helping them and other developing countries get out of the poverty trap. He also relayed that some Western politicians are weaving traps to disrupt and undermine China's cooperation with developing countries, and that data from the World Bank show the multilateral financial institutions and commercial creditors hold nearly 3/4 of Africa's total external debt, creating the biggest debt burden for African countries, which constitutes the biggest source of debt pressure on developing countries. Cameroon's Economy Minister Lamine Ousmane Made said the country has relaunched talks with the US to end its suspension from the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act initiative, which grants qualifying African countries tariff-free access to the US market. In 2019, the US kicked Cameroon out of the AGOA program for rights violations by security forces in the southwest and northwest regions. The fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic and global shocks triggered by the conflict in Ukraine have hit Cameroon hard, denting economic growth and undermined its ability to repay debt. The International Monetary Fund has classified Cameroon as being at high risk of debt distress, but the fund added that Yaoundé's debt could still be sustainable with sound fiscal reforms and management. Kenya's President William Ruto announced that the country will not acquire loans to pay civil servants even as union groups threaten to go on strike due to unpaid salaries. He emphasized that taxes collected by the Revenue Authority will be utilized to pay the salaries. However, at least 2 worker umbrella bodies have warned of a strike this week if the salaries are not paid. Currently, Kenya's public debt accounts for 65% of the national revenue, with over $420 million needed each month to pay the salaries and pensions of civil servants. This development comes after the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund separately warned of a new debt crisis in sub-Saharan Africa, with numerous countries at a high risk of debt distress. Italy on Thursday vowed a host of investments in Tunisia and help in negotiating an International Monetary Fund bailout as Rome seeks to stabilize the North African country's economic crisis and stem the increased number of migrants coming to the European nation. Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani outlined Italy's efforts and pledges during a meeting with its Tunisian counterpart, Nabil Amara, who insisted that Tunisia has seen growing numbers of African migrants arriving from the Libyan border and needs economic help. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says Tunisia is experiencing its worst crisis in a generation, with inflation hovering around 11% and food increasingly scarce. The government is negotiating a $2 billion to $4 billion loan with the IMF to cope with the budget deficit aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic and fallout from Russia's war in Ukraine. But in return for a deal, Tunisia would have to commit to some reforms, including shrinking the public administration sector, one of the world's largest, which sits up about a third of the state budget. The IMF also is demanding the gradual lifting of subsidies and privatization of state-owned enterprises, which implies massive layoffs and the worsening of unemployment. South Africa has managed to attract new investment commitments from investors worth about $84 billion over the next 5 years. President Cyril Ramaphosa met with investors as part of the 5th South Africa Investment Conference. The Chief Executive Officer of the South African Breweries, Richard Rivett Kanak, explains that the investment pledge is expected to create 40,000 jobs in the country. The South Africa investment was first introduced by President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2018 to help attract more investors to the country. While President Ramaphosa has put forward his multi-billion-dollar investment target, South Africans believe that he needs to focus on eradicating electricity blackout in order to boost investor confidence. The African Airlines Association said traffic in March reached 94.8% of 2019 levels as more international routes and tourism reopened. It noted that domestic flights accounted for 37% of the March traffic, with intra-African flights at 31% and intercontinental travel at 32%. Data also shows that the total number of intercontinental routes operated by African Airlines have exceeded pre-COVID levels since October 2022. The association said that African Airlines are on course to narrow their revenue gap in 2023 after losing $3.5 billion in revenue in 2022 and $8.6 billion in 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which led to the grounding of some airlines in Africa. Others, like Ethiopian Airlines, converted their passenger jet into freighters to compensate for reduced passenger traffic. The first operational Kenyan satellite, Taifa 1, was put into orbit Saturday by a rocket of the company SpaceX, which took off from California in the United States, according to images of the American space company. The launch, initially scheduled for Monday evening in the United States, had been postponed several times this week due to bad weather conditions. Designed and developed by a team of Kenyan researchers, the satellite will provide data in the areas of agriculture and environmental monitoring in Kenya, valuable for the future of the country as they currently experience a historic drought. Kenya Minister of Defense said that the exploration will help improve their food security and be able to have high-quality data of Earth observation and also predict the yield of crops. Kenya had sent its first nano-satellites into space in 2018. As of 2022, more than 50 African satellites have been sent into space, according to Space in Africa, a Nigerian company that tracks African space programs. And in sports, the second edition of the National Junior Tournament, which began on March 31 and is scheduled to conclude on May 1, has become one of the most highly anticipated tennis events in the country. World-renowned former tennis superstar Serena Williams has expressed her admiration for the outstanding growth of tennis in Ghana, particularly the ongoing 2023 National Junior Tournament in Accra. And that's it for this week's weekly Pan-African News Roundup on the Kente Business Journal. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the notification bell to stay updated always. You can also follow us on our social media platforms. Catch you next weekend.
Thank you very much for watching this video. Please do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel Kente Business Journal TV and press the notification bell to stay updated always.